40 years of 40 years, home will square the creek bank where the water flows slow. The secrets settle deep.
This is the story of two hearts that danced a long time ago, a love that outlived its promise, and how sometimes a story just ain't finished until the very last page is turned. It's a front porch kind of story, so take a seat and listen well. The air hung thick and heavy, like a velvet curtain, the way it only does in August down here in the deep south. The scent of funeral lilies and old rain mixed on the breeze. Sarah, who was 65 and carried the years like elegant beads on a chain, adjusted the collar of her black dress. She hadn't been back to Havenwood, Alabama, in 40 years, not since the day she packed her little Ford and drove toward a life that promised more than cotton fields and broken-down dreams. She was here now for her childhood friend, Martha's viewing. Her heart felt like a hollowed-out gourd. Then she saw him, standing by the mahogany casket, his shoulders a little stooped, his silver hair catching the dull light. It was James, her James, the one whose memory was a sweet, sharp pain she'd learned to live with, like a stone in her shoe. He wore a suit that looked well-worn and familiar, and his big hands, the hands that used to carve her little wooden birds, were clasped together. Her breath hitched, that old, familiar feeling, that electric jolt that used to run between them like lightning. It was still there. It was still there like a ghost in the room. He turned. Their eyes met, and the 4 decades between them shriveled up like old paper. James's eyes, those kind, deep-set eyes that always looked like he was thinking of poetry, widened just a fraction. It was the same look he gave her the morning he slipped a tiny, tarnished silver ring on her finger, right by the creek bank. "We'll be forever, Sarah," he'd promised, and she believed him. She'd believed him then, just like she believed the sun would rise. He made his way through the cluster of mourners, moving slowly, deliberately, the way a man does when he's walking into a memory. When he finally stood before her, the silence was louder than any weeping. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice rougher than she remembered, like dry leaves skittering across the porch. "It's been a minute." That was James, always an understatement. A minute. 40 years felt like a lifetime of minutes. "James," she replied, her own voice steady, betraying none of the chaos swirling inside her. She offered a small, polite nod, the kind you give a distant acquaintance, not the man who had known her every secret. The conflict rose up right then, hot and sharp. She had built a whole new life, a successful career, a clean, modern apartment in Atlanta. She had moved on. But seeing him, she realized she hadn't just moved on. She had only moved away from him. Later, at the cemetery, under the merciless southern sun, they stood on opposite sides of the fresh grave, 2 pillars of granite, unmoving. The old preacher's words drifted over them, meaningless noise compared to the silent argument raging between their hearts. "Why did you leave?" his eyes asked. "Why didn't you follow?" Her soul countered. The story, it seemed, was picking up right where the last tragic sentence had ended. After the burial, at the small reception in the church hall, Sarah found herself cornered near the punch bowl. James appeared, holding 2 paper cups. He offered her one. "Sweet tea, just the way you like it, strong and cold." He remembered. Of course, he remembered. That simple act, knowing her taste in tea after all this time, was a punch to her carefully guarded heart. The promise, that young, foolish promise, felt suddenly terrifyingly real again. "We need to talk, Sarah. Not here. Not with the whole town watching," he murmured, his gaze intense. His urgency was unsettling. It tugged at a thread deep inside her, a thread she thought she'd snipped long ago. But the folks of Havenwood had long memories, and Sarah didn't want the spectacle. She just wanted to leave and go back to her tidy, predictable life. "There's nothing to talk about, James. That was another lifetime," she insisted, turning away, but his hand caught her elbow, a light, firm touch that radiated warmth. A jolt, that same jolt. It wasn't another lifetime. It was the beginning of this one, and it ended unfinished. He let go, but the ghost of his touch lingered on her skin. The next morning, Sarah drove her rented car down the dusty lane to their old spot, the creek bank, where the weeping willows dipped their green hair into the water. The silver ring, the one she'd secretly kept tucked away in a velvet box, felt heavy in her pocket. She just had to see the place one last time to put the memory to rest, to finally close the book. When she got there, James was already sitting on the same smooth, gray stone they used to share. He was carving a tiny, perfect wooden wren. He looked up, and for the first time, she saw the weariness in his face, the silent toll the years had taken. He held out the bird. "I finished it. Finally." "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why all this? Why now?" She pulled the little silver ring from her pocket and held it out. It glittered faintly in the dappled sunlight. "I kept this, all these years. I kept the promise, even when you let it die." She was accusing him, yes, but she was also confessing her own enduring pain. James took a long, slow breath. "I never let it die, Sarah. I just let you go." He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a leather cord. On it hung a twin ring, a tarnished silver band just like hers. "I couldn't follow you. My mother, she was sick. No one else to care for her. I had to stay. I never stopped loving you. But I had to keep a promise to the woman who gave me life." That was the twist, the heart of the matter. Two separate promises, pulling them in two different directions. Her sharp anger dissolved into a crippling sorrow. She had been angry at a ghost of a man she'd misunderstood for decades. She had held onto a heartbreak that was built on a lie of omission. It was a classic Southern tragedy. "I never knew," she whispered, tears finally slipping down her weathered cheeks. He stood up, slowly, bridging the distance between them. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a warm blanket on a cold night. "I couldn't tell you. I was ashamed, I suppose. Ashamed of the life I had to choose. The life that wasn't with you." "And Martha? Your wife?" Sarah asked, needing to know everything, even the painful truth. James looked down at the flowing creek water. "Martha was good. She was kind. She knew about you, Sarah. She always knew," she said. "She said she was just holding the space for me until I could finish my own story." Martha, her friend, had been a silent guardian of their love. He finally looked back at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "Our story never ended, Sarah. It just took a long detour. Now the detour's done. We're older, we're maybe a little wiser, but the heart remembers the music, doesn't it?" He took a step closer. The air was thick with possibility, that beautiful, terrifying second chance. He reached out and gently cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. "Do you want to finally finish our story, Sarah? Right here, right now, just like we promised all those years ago." He held her gaze, a simple, earnest question hanging in the quiet southern air. The river flowed on, the willows wept softly, and the old promise, the love that outlived its own ending, waited for its final chapter. Sarah placed her hand over his. The twin rings, her old one and his, were still in their respective pockets. But the only ring that mattered was the one of memory, the invisible bond that had held them tethered across 40 years of distance. She didn't say yes. She didn't need to. She just leaned into his embrace, and the two old lovers, finally home, stood by the creek and let the setting sun wrap them in the beginning of their last sweet chapter. And that, children, is how some stories finally find their truth.